Hello and welcome back to Thacc on the Wire. I'm here with my co-host Dang, and today we're going to be discussing Mary Oliver's The Kingfisher. We're the thanks to our sponsors, Medford Myers and Thacc Clan, for today's podcast. Dang, would you like to start us out with a short reading of this beautiful poem?
I'd love to. Here is The Kingfisher by Mary Oliver. The kingfisher rises out of the black wave, like a blue flower in his beak. He carries a silver leaf. I think this is the prettiest world, so long as you don't mind a little dying. How could there be a day in your whole life that doesn't have its splash of happiness? There are more fish than there are leaves on 1,000 trees. And anyway, the kingfisher wasn't born to think about it, or anything else. When the waves snapped shut over his blue head, the water remained silent. Hunger is the only story he has ever heard in his life that he could believe. I don't say he's right, neither do I say he's wrong. Religiously, he swallows the silver leaf with its broken red river, and with a rough and easy cry. I couldn't rouse out my thoughtful body if my life depended on it. He swings back over the bright sea to do the same thing, to do it as I long to do something, anything, perfectly. The Kingfisher by Mary Oliver.
That's very nice.
Yes. So, Finn, you were actually the person who suggested this poem that we analyze this poem. What in it really spoke to you to make you want to choose it?
I'm very glad you asked, Dang. Right, this poem is very meaningful to me. It makes me think about a lot of things and really my place in the universe. If you look at the line, I think this is the prettiest world, so long as you don't mind a little dying. How could there be a day in your whole life that doesn't have its splash of happiness? It really kind of sets the stage for this interaction between the protagonist of the poem and the kingfisher, where the protagonist is appreciating the beauty of the kingfisher's movements throughout nature and is just able to be in the presence of this wonderful ballet between the kingfisher and the waves snapping shut over the kingfisher's blue head and the kingfisher taking the silver leaf of the fish. And the protagonist can kind of be an observer here. And I think that really speaks to the privilege humans have of being able to observe nature and its cycles of life and death without being subject to those constant fears and those cycles, even though in our own world where there are cycles of life and death which we still live in fear, but we've kind of evolved past the traditional cycles of predator and prey, and I think this poem really highlights that beautifully.
I mean, we even still see that, like, the idea of being an observer, you don't have to worry about the actual, any dangers, like you were saying, in the environments. Like, we see that in especially conflicts throughout the world. Like, if you're not actually present there in, say, like a war, you're not really worried about how it's going to affect you. You're just observing. And again, like that level of privilege that you have as an observer. I think
Oh,
that's,
definitely.
yeah. So I was reading her biography, and I noticed that she cited a couple of poets as some of her biggest influences, Walt Whitman and Henry David Thoreau. And you actually mentioned that these two are very prolific poets in their own right and super influential in the world of poetry. You want to talk a little bit more on
Oh,
how
of
we can kind of
course.
see them in her poetry?
Of course. I think, well, obviously, Walt Whitman and Henry David Thoreau, two of the most famous naturalist authors in the history of literature and the history of poetry. And I think that the observations of nature that we see in most of Mary Oliver's work, and especially in The Kingfisher, comes a lot from Thoreau, as well as Oliver's own experience, in the wild. As she said in that original biography, she would go into the woods to escape a troubled home or troubled home life. But it's kind of the same situation with Thoreau, where he used nature as an escape from the world, and I think we see that as well from Whitman, definitely, especially in his work Leaves of Grass. But as well in Leaves of Grass, I think we begin to see the emergence of Walt Whitman's famous or the form of which Walt Whitman is kind of a master, which is free form poetry, or free verse poetry, excuse me. And I think in the Kingfisher, it really runs through free verse. It kind of feels like Mary Oliver, or whoever the protagonist of the poem is kind of just walking us through the situations. She's not singing a sonnet. She's not reciting a haiku. She's simply sitting, talking, watching, and observing.
It's very like a descriptive style of poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, we definitely see that like naturalism uh, play a role in, especially the Kingfisher. We see that um, Kingfisher. We see the ocean environment. You'll see that. I like that metaphor for and saying a silver leaf. That's obviously representing like a fish that the Kingfisher is what's it, diving for.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a lot of not only metaphor, but a lot of like what is it? See a lot of other what authorial devices. Is that what they're called again? So
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned that there's a lot of what is it alliteration of certain letters or certain sounds throughout the poem, like that broken red river with a rough and easy cry. I couldn't rouse on my thoughtful body. We hear a lot of that R sound being repeated. What does that like make you feel as the reader?
I think this that one kind of chunk of lines. Religiously, he swallows the silver leaf with its broken red river, and with a rough and easy cry, I couldn't rouse out of my thoughtful body if my life depended on it. Kind of, it sets up a juxtaposition between all these hard R sounds, which are kind of lead like rough, broken. They simulate violence. They simulate assault. They simulate every kind of sharp and hard concepts in the mind with that with those sounds, and it's kind of it's that duality with these metaphors that we see that are kind of peaceful. You know, silver leaf, broken red river. Focusing specifically on that red river part, the leaf. It's you kind of think of the peaceful parts of nature. You know, leaves on trees swaying, rivers flowing, and she applies these metaphors to these hard sounds, and I think it creates kind of a beautiful juxtaposition there.
Kind of combines the smooth, swooping S with like you saying that hard, rough R sound.
Mm-hmm. Especially way snapped shut over his blue head. All of these flowing, the splash of happiness, the fish, especially that long S in the fish, kind of lends into a flow that's a bit broken up there. Religiously, he swallows the silver leaf with his broken red river, but yeah, she's using these S's and R's to kind of contradict each other.
Yeah, as you're saying, yeah, the poem is kind of broken up with those line spaces, and there are like different breaks, different types of breaks throughout the the poem, and also her different uses of meter also help pace the entire poem. Like the Kingfisher rises out of the black wave. Um, so that we see, yeah, different syllables being stressed to focus on like the Kingfisher and that black or the color of the wave. It helps create like imagery for well us, the reader. I don't know. Do you
Definitely.
see anywhere else that that
Uh,
meter kind of helps?
I see what you mean. I think she's kind of stressing the descriptors here: the black of the wave, the blue of the flower, the silver of the leaf, to really make us focus on these words, make us imagine this colorful relationship between all the elements of nature here.
And as we're reading this poem, Is there anything that, like, for me personally, I feel this poem kind of speaks on, like, is that the human, current, like, modern human condition, um, where we're really kind of distracted by things. She's, Mary Oliver writes about this kingfisher where he says all that he has, or hunger is the only story that he has ever heard in his life, and that he religiously swallows the silver leaf. This is all the kingfisher has to worry about is, well, just getting his next meal. But whereas the protagonist, which we assume is Mary Oliver, says, "I couldn't rouse on my thoughtful body if my life depended on it," and that she longs to do something, anything perfectly. Kind of speaks on how nowadays we're just super distracted by life, by work or school, or whatever personal conflicts are going on through relationships in your life. Because humans don't really have the he was speaking on being human as and have as having like a level of privilege earlier. But I feel
Mhm.
like this poem's kind of saying the message that the nature has the privilege of not needing to worry about human problems, really.
I think I definitely see what you mean there. I think that this poem does speak on both fronts. It's saying that while the appreciation of these cycles of life and death allow us to escape them and kind of appreciate nature on its own, it this evolution has kind of placed us in a position where we're facing new problems. We're facing differences of ethics, differences of morals, differences of opinions, which wouldn't really be seen in an animal kingdom if we lived in it, where the only ethics are really the survival of the fittest. You know, you eat to survive, you run to survive, and in the human world, it's not so much the same anymore. It's more intellectual. We have that capability to kind of look away from the traditional conflicts of nature and move towards more metaphysical ones while simultaneously observing the beauty that we left behind.
It's kind of as if we're longing for a simpler past. We want to return to that more, that less hectic life.
Definitely. And I think looking at Mary Oliver's influences, especially in Henry David Thoreau, we see that he also kind of longed for that return to a simple life that I feel we may all have inside ourselves.
Yeah, definitely get that sometimes, especially
Hmm.
doing full IB. I really wish, sometimes
Definitely.
I didn't do that. Just wishing
You
for
could just be
back in
you could
middle
just be a
school.
bird hunting fish.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
kingfisher.
All right, dang. I think that may be our time.
I think it is.
But thank you very much for listening to another episode of Thacc on the Wire,
Yes.
and a beautiful poem and an even more beautiful analysis.
Yes.
Thank you to our sponsors,
Medford and
and
Myers and Thacc Clan and Finbarr
and
and
that
Dang. Custom word turn pens.
especially,
Yes.
and that will be all.
Thank you. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.